Hey everybody, welcome back to another Bald Movie. Today we're going to be talking about the 2001 movie directed by Cameron Crowe called Vanilla Sky. You might recognize Cameron Crowe as the writer of Fast Times at Ridgemont High, also the writer-director of Say Anything, Singles, Jerry Maguire, Almost Famous, We Bought a Zoo, one of his lesser-known titles. This was based on a Spanish-language foreign film, Abre los Ojos, Open Your Eyes, which also starred Penelope Cruz. And as far as I can tell, the Spanish-speaking Tom Cruise, he's a very handsome individual. The American version stars Tom Cruise, Penelope Cruz, Kurt Russell, Jason Lee, Cameron Diaz, Michael Shannon, a very young Michael Shannon, Tilda Swinton, Alicia Witt, who Bald Move last might recognize as the matriarch of the Crow family in Justified. Noah Taylor, which Bald Move fans might recognize as the dastardly Bolton Lieutenant Locke from Game of Thrones. And Timothy Spall, who everyone but Jim will recognize as Peter Pettigrew / Scabbers, the rat from Harry Potter. I don't want to say this is going to be an odd, like, spoiler-free upfront review, because I think this movie, the less you know about it, the less you go into the movie, the better off you will be. And since I missed this when it was big 20 years ago, I didn't know much about it, and I'm glad of that. So I think here's what I'll say. This movie is very not controversial. It's very polarizing. It has about a 45% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed it and thought it was thought-provoking, very well made, very well acted and crafted. And I'm going to leave it at that. Jim, what's your opinion?
Yeah, so the first time I saw this was maybe a couple years after it came out on DVD. So almost 20 years ago. This is the second time I've seen it in 20 years. And I found myself really enjoying it too. It wasn't until after I watched it this time around that I went and I looked at the reviews, and you're right, it's polarizing. And I think a lot of people can't get over the fact that this is, you said it's based on this Abre los Ojos. But it's not just based on that movie. It is that movie. Like,
it's like a shot-for-shot remake.
I can't think of any other movie where the same actor plays the same character, just speaking a different language in all the same scenes.
Yeah.
Like, there's no difference from what I could tell with the little cursory viewing of Abre los Ojos. I didn't actually view it. I just sort of went and looked at some of the screenshots and stuff. It's identical. Yeah. Identical. I read the synopsis, identical.
Yeah, so I think this only came out 3 years before the release of this, so like maybe it felt more like plagiarism than an adaptation. And I think it was that movie was highly regarded at the time. But I don't know, there's a lot of things like Penelope Cruz won a Razzie for Worst Actress for this movie. That's a fucking assassination.
Yeah.
That's completely
She's great in this movie.
Uncalled for and unjustified. I can't fully explain it. Like I said, maybe if you saw the Spanish speaking version of this first, then it's just such a copy that but that's the only thing I can think of. I do want to see the Spanish version of it because I quite enjoyed this, and if it's a shot-for-shot remake, I think that'd be kind of interesting. Okay, I think it's time for us to shift to the spoiler part of the review. We're actually going to talk about the movie, and if you haven't seen it, again, kind of a checkered recommendation. You got a 50-50 shot of whether you like it or not, or maybe much higher if you haven't seen the original. So go, please pause this, go off and see it if you need to do so, and then come back and join. All right. Presumably you've done the homework required to enjoy this review without being spoiled. Okay. I will say that I was a little spoiled by this movie because when we talked about watching it, I can't remember why. It just came up, it was like, oh, Vanilla Sky. Yeah, I haven't seen that. And then you and Cecily started debating whether this should go in the Pulp and Prestige. And it turned, and because I knew nothing, I thought that this was like a well-regarded Oscar-winning film or Oscar-nominated film. That's not true at all. And I remember that like Tom Cruise's face is fucked up, but I really only think I remember that because Kanye West shouts it out in his Through the Wire song where he had his car accident. So I kind of understood that Tom Cruise's face is fucked up and he wears a mask. But you guys debating whether it should be in Pulp or Prestige, revolving around whether it's a science fiction film or not. I was the entire time waiting for the sci-fi twist.
It's hilarious that you say that because having seen this movie 20 years ago, I was also doing the same,
Yeah.
waiting for the sci-fi twist I knew was coming. Because, man, it comes way later than I remembered. Way
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. And it's
It's effectively just a Sixth Sense end of the movie reveal.
except for the Sixth Sense at least had ghosts and shit from the very beginning. Like its reveal, its twist was that, Bruce Willis himself was a ghost. But like this, like at first I'm like, okay, this is a movie about a rich kid coming to grips with his success and how much of it's earned and how much of it is like he's trying to sabotage and his relationships and coming, and then takes a a violent turn in act 2 into like this taut psychological thriller. And then, like, well into the third act, halfway through the third act, it gets like really weird, and then it just reveals that, yeah, it's essentially a science fiction piece where this entire movie has been playing out in someone's head as he is frozen in some kind of Alcor / Phoenix Institute cryogenics lab, experiencing a lucid dream package, and is preparing to be awoken, or, well, I guess he's presented with the choice whether he wants to continue to sleep in cryosleep or take a shot in the real world.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to talk about all that stuff, but where the hell do you want to begin? There's a couple of observations I want to make, see if you agree with me.
Okay.
This soundtrack is both great and terrible at the same time. I love all of the sound. This is a very mid to late 80s soundtrack. Lots of REM, but it's very jarring and clashing when they're used. Like,
Yeah, I don't think it's particularly well used music. I think like there's a Radiohead song up at the beginning that I really thought was, I really liked the song, but I don't know that it's amazing. I'll say there's one song in this that I don't really like, and it's unfortunate because it's the title track, Vanilla Sky, written by Paul McCartney specifically for this movie. It's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah. I thought that this movie does a lot of really interesting like pieces of foreshadowing with because like there's hints throughout the movie, if you know what to look for, about this Benny the dog, this dog that gets frozen in a lake and then recovered, and then there's like different things you find out about Benny. Like sometimes you find out that Benny is like, oh, he's perfectly normal and it seems like he's a normal dog. But then there's an appearance, I think it's on Conan O'Brien maybe, or maybe it's Dave Letterman, where he appears like he's catatonic or depressed. And those revelations kind of line up with, I guess, as Tom Cruise's various participations in his dream / nightmare. I thought that was interesting. There's also a line where he's talking about treatment with his condition with the doctors, and he says, "Oh, their plans seem like science fiction to me, things that jumped out, but really there's nothing to let you know what you're in for until like the final 15 or so minutes of the movie."
Yeah, I do think there are some breadcrumbs, things that having seen it before, I was sort of picking up on, knowing the ending of this movie. Benny the dog is probably the biggest one, I think, especially in the early going of this movie. And like you said, things sort of ramp up when you get to the Kurt Russell and Tom Cruise stuff, where it starts to get deeper into his psychological analysis. You start to see the edges, you start to see the cracks of that reality. But then, like you said, it turns into this thriller, and you're just thinking, oh, well, it's a guy with a serious head injury. It's a guy who is traumatized by, this betrayal where he's driven off the fucking cliff here. And you think, okay, well, this is just all in his head. Like, this is a game of, did he kill this person? Didn't he? And by the end of the movie, that's just totally changed.
And there's a point, there's so many red herrings that don't, like, they don't feel cheap or unearned. Like, for example, there was a part where I was working up a theory that Jason Lee was doing all this to him as a form of revenge.
Yeah.
Like
because he's so jealous throughout the whole movie, right? And he keeps saying it over and over, like, "Oh, you're amazing. You look fantastic. You're great with women. You're great with specifically the woman that I came here with."
Yeah, and there's that one really interesting.
incredibly
there's that
jealous.
one great scene where like after Tom Cruise gets his miracle treatment that puts his face back together, where like Jason Lee says, "Oh my God, your face is coming apart the seams, it's splitting open," and Tom Cruise starts to free, and he's like, "Ah, I'm just fucking with you," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's definitely the hint," but nah, none of that
It was a
matters.
hint. It was a hint. The way that everybody's attitudes changed and everything
Mm.
became rosier and great was a hint. Just at something different.
I thought that the mask itself did a lot of heavy lifting in the especially in the second act of the movie
Mhm.
because you've got someone that's like famously good looking like Tom Cruise. And then fully half of the movie he spends either in fucked up like scarred facial reconstruction makeup or with this blank like William Shatner from what's that, the Halloween kind of appliance mask, but you can
Uh,
still see his eyes and his mouth kinds. I don't, there was something really affecting, I thought, about that particular prosthetic, the device.
yeah, I mean they say in the movie that it interacts reflexively or something, reflectively maybe with the movements of your face. I'm like bullshit.
Yeah, it doesn't do
That
shit.
mask doesn't move at all.
Like I thought that was
Uh,
like Tom Cruise, like, oh, okay, well that's good because for a moment I thought this was just a fucking mask.
yeah, it's fantastic, and he's fantastic in this. But the other thing about that mask is there seems to be moments in this movie where maybe the props department was not quite up to the task, or I can't find out. I can't figure out what they're doing with the mask because there are moments where the mask seems to be this rigid, sort of like you said, Halloween William Shatner mask,
Mm-hmm.
and then there are moments where it's a material that is like a silicone that is very pliable, and when he pulls this mask off,
Uh huh.
you can tell it's not the same mask, and I don't know if that's because it wasn't intended to be shot in this higher resolution or
Are you talking about the
they were.
purple, the purple mask? Okay, because
No,
there's
there's another shot where he takes the mask off and
I
it just
gotcha.
looks bad.
And
It
there's
doesn't
all
look like the same prop.
they do a lot of stuff with that too. Like there's this one scene where he goes through the club and makes an ass of himself, and he puts it on backwards.
I love that. Yeah.
So you can't tell like where if Tom Cruise is coming or going, and it's like a
Hmm.
really effective and an unsettling shot, and really executed well. Um, but I don't know because like I didn't know much about Cameron Crowe, but when I saw this movie, I'm like, okay, I got to dig into who Cameron Crowe is. So here's his he grew up in California. He is the son of a wealthy real estate developer and a public intellectual mother. And he apparently was brilliant. He skipped 3 grades throughout grade school and high school, graduated either 3 or 4 years early, and then while he was still a teenager, went undercover at a local high school and wound up writing the script to what that ended up becoming Fast Times at Ridgemont High, using his connections from his family to get that developed. And I wonder how much of this appealed because he sees himself as this David character, where he has like a career built on. I'm just trying to like the David feels
Inherited
like,
success.
yeah, that his success is less about himself and less and more about him just lucking into this position. And like, there's early indications where he kind of almost feels like he's self-sabotaging himself. Like, instead of trying to work hard and earn the approval of the Seven Dwarfs, the board of directors that monitors him and his trust, he kind of like conspicuously shows up late, skateboards through the hallways, leaves a wake of destruction amongst the women in New York.
Continues to be Citizen Dildo.
Becomes Citizen Dildo and kind of embraces that role. And
Mhm.
then when he has this setback where his looks are taken from him and he's crippled, and he has to do his recovery, it spawns him to like genuine greatness, where he's
Mhm.
pouring over. Like suddenly he now he's got an appetite for the less superficial. He's going in and reading all the manuscripts, and he's really sweating all the details of his magazines, and he's trying to resurrect the literary the literature as a fine art form. And I thought that stuff was really interesting. And I can see why a guy like Cameron Crowe would be gravitate toward this material, but it kind of got exploded when I found out that this was literally a shot for shot remake of another person's work,
Hmm.
where it's like all that stuff that I saw him injecting himself into, like, it feels like it's all in the original material, which I thought was real.
Yeah.
Like, that's really weird. Um,
There's a sort of strange irony to that whole thing that like you would identify with this material because clearly you don't make this movie without identifying with the original movie.
yeah, yeah,
You would identify with that sentiment and then go and sort of piggyback on the success and the hard work of the writers of that film to turn it into something for an American audience. And I can see this two ways. I can see
mhm,
that as like, oh, you're just being Citizen Dildo here, and like I said, piggybacking on this other hard worker. Or you could see it as this is something I identify with and appreciate, and I think more people need to get a look at. And so I'm putting it out there in, a language, because frankly, a lot of people aren't going to sit and watch a subtitled movie in this country. It's just how
yeah.
it is. So getting, these ideas out in front of people might have just been important to him.
What's wild is that this seemed like it was his magnum opus. Like, he made this at the top, at his height of his career. He took all of the clout that he had built from Almost Famous. I've never actually seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I know all the memes from
Huh.
it, but I've never actually seen. I've seen Almost Famous and I quite like it. I've of course seen Jerry Maguire. He took all that clout he got and put it into this project, and then there's a precipitous drop off in his career after this. Like I said, the only thing I'd even heard of was We Bought a Zoo, or whatever the hell, the Matt Damon weirdo movie, family film, and that did not
Huh.
get a lot of great critical reviews. This, I wonder if like he made this and it's like something very important and it really spoke to him and people shat on it, and then he just kind of like, well, fuck it, I'm still rich. But I don't know. He keeps making movies.
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe this is where the wheels came off. It's unfortunate because, like, again, maybe I just need to see the original and that would answer all my questions. But I feel like, regardless of what you thought about Cameron Crowe and whether he should remake this film and how he should direct it, like, a lot of people shit on Tom Cruise's performance, a lot of people shit on Penelope Cruz's performance, and I think especially the Penelope Cruz, I thought she was amazing in this film. I haven't seen
Yeah.
her in a lot of things that I like, but she was everything she needed to be in this film.
Yeah.
Um,
And so much of your understanding of Tom Cruise's character, of David, comes from who she is
mhm,
and more importantly who he remembers her as. And if she is not just like this kind playful spirit
mhm,
throughout this entire movie, that you don't believe it, right? You
right.
don't buy it.
Yeah, and she's not all just like some kind of dream girl. Like, you can tell, like, she
Uh-huh.
has to be unnerved by some things, like Tom Cruise's performance at the nightclub, and she has to be afraid, and she has to be uncomfortable, and she has to be like gutted with sorrow. Like, she does all the things I feel like a good that go into a good performance, and and she wins a Razzie for this. Like,
It's ridiculous.
holy shit, kicking somebody when they're doing. I mean, I don't know if it's like, I actually thought it was a genuinely good performance, but it's certainly above average.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. It's
Yeah, and her character I sort of view as like the if David is Citizen Dildo, then fuck, I can't think of a good comparison. She's the opposite end of that spectrum, right? She's the one who feels things deeply, does not let all of this just sort of roll past her and slide off her back. She's living a true, genuine life, whereas he's living a hollow shell of a life.
yeah, yeah. Um,
And that comes across in the performance, which is why I think it's so good.
I also thought Cameron Diaz did a really good job in this. Oh, you don't
Okay,
like it?
I don't like Cameron Diaz. I
Okay,
don't think she's an amazing actress.
I
But
actually will co-sign that. There's been very few things that
okay,
I've 100% totally liked her in.
I think she was
Uh,
kind of the sort of crazy, wide-eyed performance you needed in this, though.
yeah, but I thought it was a gradual, like,
Hmm.
realization of that.
Yeah,
Like, she first appears as kind of like this easy breezy, kind of model actress, like equivalent to David. and then by the time you realize she's much more, you're going on that realization from David, and like I thought Tom Cruise played that perfect, like that kind of like
Yeah.
keep the smile plastered, keep talking her through this. This is weird. We're gonna get through it until she's literally driving them off a bridge and killing them both.
Hmm.
Well, almost killing him, I guess. I thought she did a really good job, and then Jason Lee, I really like Jason Lee. I'm not sure why he didn't have a bigger career than he did.
Is he My Name is Earl?
He's My Name is Earl, which I guess
Okay.
he had a very well regarded and successful TV career. He also he's done a lot of good work with, Kevin Smith, but I thought he
Yep.
did really good character work. And he's like, I don't know, he seems like the type of guy who would be a wingman to Tom Cruise. He's good looking on his own and he's kind of charming, but also like, comes up a little wanting when he's standing beside Tom Cruise.
Who
Uh,
doesn't? Come
but
on.
he's super intelligent and
Unless you like tall guys, you're gonna come up wanting next to him.
tall bearded guys. But yeah, like
Yeah, I don't know. Jason Lee's hair is a fascination to me. I don't understand what's happening with it in any given moment. Like it's not bad, but it's not like it's just there and it's wild and you can tell he's trying to do something with it, but nothing is happening with it. Nothing. I don't get it.
So let's talk about the end of this movie. I mean, do you want to talk about the middle parts? Because like I said, it's weird because I thought like at every stage of this movie, I had something different to say. Like in the first act, I'm like, okay, this is what I think where I'm going to approach this film. In the second, like, oh man, I got so much to say about Kurt Russell's character, and this game, this psychological game he's playing here. And then you get it to the end of the movie, and that's all bullshit.
Yeah.
So let's talk about at the end. What do we think actually happened? What they say happens is that these dream sequences last a particular time, and then they kind of run their course. And when they're over, there's a choice where you can be woken up from your cryogenic state, and they've some hundreds of years have passed, and they tell
Yeah.
him, you can stay in here and sleep for essentially forever, or you can go out in the real world. But you got to understand the real world has changed. Like all the people you cared about are now dead. They ominously say like your fortune won't last very long. Uh,
I
and
guess Print has died, and without him, they didn't move on.
Yeah, and they didn't just put his money into like an interest-bearing bank account, and he'd be like even stupider rich than he is now, or maybe I don't know. Inflation just really tore the heart out of the finances, the deal. And then there's like they design a psychological test because he's got this well-established fear of heights, and the choice he has to make is jump off the building, or go back to sleep and restart to dream over, I guess.
Mhm.
Then he jumps off, and his life flashes before his eyes, and then we begin like then you hear Penelope Cruz say, "Open your eyes." I feel like I reject that, a plain reading of that scene. Here's one theory I want to try out on you, Jim. Maybe you've got some.
Okay, I do.
Was it time for him to wake up, or was this some kind of cynical ploy to kick him off the coverage? Because his bank account was getting low. It's very expensive to keep a person in suspended animation running this thing, and it's essentially a trick to get him to either wake him up or pull the plug.
Is this the final revenge of the board? Is this
It
like
could
the
be,
board? He's
yeah.
been a drain on the company. Like the resources for keeping him alive are more than they can bear at this point.
Or is this a
Because
guy who's
print
been in a
journalism's
coma
dying.
ever since the accident? This cryogenic thing is just his, like, is this just all him coming to grips with the fact that he's being pulled off they've considered him beyond medical improvement. They're going to pull the plug, and this is a dying man's brain coming to grips with that. That's the other theory I had.
That feels extremely cynical, and therefore I love it. So yeah, I mean that's totally possible. Can I throw out another option here?
Okay.
This is a dying man. This is hell for a man who squandered his life. There is no simulation. He's being told that there's a simulation, and every time he tries to wake up from this simulation, and makes that choice, he's re-wrapped back to the beginning of this movie where they say the exact same line.
And so I really liked Roger Ebert's review on this because he, before he wrote the review, saw it twice because he wanted to, make sure he was getting the right interpretation. He pointed out something that I didn't get, which is Penelope Cruz begins the movie with saying "Open your eyes," and we're led to believe that that's a recording by Cameron Diaz, but it's clearly Penelope Cruz. And Roger Ebert points out that they're at this point, if the movie is being straight with its chronology, Tom Cruise couldn't possibly have met Penelope Cruz's character yet. So
Couldn't have met her, and if he's waking up to a new reality and it says "Open your eyes," she couldn't possibly still be alive.
Right. So it works in the very beginning of the movie when you hear he hasn't met her yet, and at the very end of the movie, it's hundreds of years in the future and she's dead. So who the hell is saying that? And there's a couple. There's the positive. The other positive spin is he's a man in a coma and he's kind of fighting for his life, and subconsciously he's now ready to wake up, and it's actually Penelope Cruz saying "Open your eyes," and he's going to wake up in like a Mr. Robot type of way. But that doesn't explain the beginning of the movie where Penelope Cruz is telling him to open up his eyes, because that just is, there's no grand unified theory of the movie that I've come up with yet that would explain that.
And it seems like in that case, the splice point would have to be different than what they claim it is, right? And I know there wouldn't be a splice point, but assuming that's all in his own mind, he would have to be in this coma after the accident, having not been the guy who changed his ways, having been a guy who's laying in a bed wishing he could change his ways, and take his life more seriously, take this relationship that's developing with Sophia more seriously. I think there's some there. I think you could certainly read it that way, but I think you could read it in numerous ways.
You got any other theories?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be a man stuck in hell being tortured by his squandered life as well. That's I don't know. That's kind of where my head was at the end of this.
That I think is the one that's most airtight, because there's no, like if it's just literally a loop
no way
in
to
hell.
disprove it.
Yeah. And they give him, like in true hell fashion, they give him just enough happiness. Oh, and that ties in with what Jason Lee says throughout the movie. You got to have enough of the sour to make the sweet to appreciate.
Which
and
means you would have to have enough sweet to make
appreciate
it truly sour.
Yeah, like if hell is just unending agony and you get no respite, then you would get inured to that new reality. But if every once in a while you get a combination where you get your face back and you get the girl of your dreams back, and it's just perfect.
But I think the voice is key there, the "open your eyes" line, because like we said, you can't have it the way the movie wants you to think it went and have that line be spoken in both instances by Penelope Cruz.
So when did he die and go to hell? Would it be like when they wrote?
I assume the crash.
But why would the hell loop start like some weeks before then? You know what I'm saying? Like if he's dead in hell, why would they start? I guess because they need to establish his dream girl for
and
maximum.
You need the sweet, yeah.
You need the sweet to make this, yeah.
Yeah, because that crash happens right after the night where they, they spend time watching Benny the dog, and they kind of fall in love in that one night, right?
Yeah, it's the first time he's actually loved. They had this really great line. There's a lot of really great lines in here, like the monologue and Tom Cruise about, isn't that what all young people secretly believe, that they'd be the one person who'd live forever. But there's also this kind of like that you meet that first person that you think might be the love of your life, like that sublime initial feeling. And there's something to that too, like that pure moment many times turns out to be a mirage, because you end up loving the person, and most relationships end in sorrow. Well, all relationships end in sorrow in the long term, because people want someone dies, or the other, or someone there's a betrayal or something. But like there's something to that too, like that moment being stuck in time where you've got that, like, oh, I just met this great girl and I think she might be the love of my life, and you never progress further than that and you're always able to stay in that like perfect state. which I thought was kind of interesting and profound as well. But I really like your hell
I
interpretation.
I wonder if it could be somehow a strange combination of all the above, because there's a point in the middle of the movie where she says open your eyes, and it's when he passes out drunk in the street, right?
Or the
And
splice
he
point.
goes into
What they say is
what's
the
that?
splice point. They say that is
Yeah,
the splice point. Yeah.
right. At the splice point, she says open your eyes. So it seems like at some point during this whole movie, in what was his real life, he must have heard her say that, and that must have
Mm.
been a big deal to him. But where could it possibly have been?
Or did he just misinterpret the Cameron Diaz characters like overly attached girlfriend behavior and like map that onto the Penelope Cruz character?
I don't know.
I do want to watch this movie because I do think there's a lot of clues. Like, for example, by the time you get to the end reveal where he's in a cryo lab, um, there's been a couple times in the movie where Tom Cruise gets like a dreamy, thoughtful look on his face and says something like it's at the frontiers of human psychology, or it's like science fiction. And you realize these are all parts of the conversation he has with the cryogenics director, played by Tilda Swinton. And like, I'd love to see in this movie another time to track to see how many of those and like in what circumstances they happen, to see like what are the triggers. In fact, were all the seven dwarfs people that work at the cryo lab? Because I thought the tech support guy was one of them for sure.
He was definitely in a few scenes, yeah. And I don't know if this is, him inserting himself, or David inserting him into memories, genuine memories that he has, or if he was legitimately part of the board. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to ask you about something that I think is just a dead end in this movie, but it strikes me as a movie that is too well written to have these kind of dead ends.
I got another one
hell-
that propound to you too after you shoot yours.
Who is Ellie? Because
Ellie.
at one point, the psychologist, Kurt Russell, asks David, I heard you shouting for Ellie's name in a nightmare, and asks who Ellie is.
What's Cameron Diaz's name?
Juliana.
Oh yeah, you're right. Who is Ellie?
I legitimately have no idea, and it's like a good minute and a half of this movie.
Oh wait, is Ellie the Alicia Witt character who's the personal assistant
Maybe.
to Tilda Swinton? Because the one I want to ask
That
you
could be.
is 4 times means something is also comes up like 3 or 4 times in the movie at various different points. And I wonder if there's a repetition of something 4 times in a movie that might also be some kind of clue to understanding its lower level or another level of it.
I'm looking through the cast list here. There's nobody named Ellie in this cast list.
Really?
And no characters named Ellie.
Well, then, like I said, I definitely want to see this. I wonder if I want to see the American version or if I want to go back and see the Spanish version.
Yeah, I wonder if that's even in the Spanish version. I wonder if this is an insert from, like a personal insert from Cameron, where he's...
It doesn't feel like a movie like Memento or Inception, to name 2 Christopher Nolan films. Feels like there's a lot more concrete rules. Like he said, like there's a lot of the initial phases of the movie saying, here are the rules in which to interpret everything you're about to see. And then you can watch it and be like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is in a deterministic fashion. This is what actually happened. This movie doesn't give you any of those grounding rules. It just throws you in and you kind of like learn as you go. So I wonder, it's a lot, because yeah, it leaves a lot of room for Cameron Crowe just to do weird things like mention a girl's name or weirdly emphasize 4 times, and it doesn't mean anything. It's just almost like a Lynchian way to increase the absurdity or increase the emotional truth or detach the emotional truth from the film from the literal things that you're watching. I don't know, but I really enjoyed the experience of watching this for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any other thoughts on it?
I'm curious. There are some things that certainly couldn't be memories that might be imaginations of David,
Such as,
but I'm trying to detect where those are. So there's the scene where he's being told, what the Matrix is essentially, and there's a depiction of his funeral, which he
Hmm.
certainly couldn't have any knowledge of, right? And Sophia showing up at that funeral and being all teary-eyed, and everybody being there, and that's transitioned into from a sequence where we are flashing back to actual memories that he had,
Mm-hmm.
or so we're told. How does that line up? Is
Hmm.
this just a blending of memory and imagination, or is there
Is it
something
another
to
part of
that?
the dream sequence? Because there's another early on. There's like this really stunning shot of him driving his Porsche through in a completely abandoned Times Square. That is a nightmare slash dream sequence, but since the entire movie is a nested nightmare slash dream sequence, that's the other thing I would check if I was taking notes. I would look and try to keep track of. It's kind of like when you're coding a nested if else, like counting all the parentheses to make sure they're all. I wonder if there is a wake up scene for every dream scene,
Mhm.
because there might be some more like cheats there too, where like he wakes up one less time than he's established to be dreaming, because there's tons and tons of dream sequences in this movie.
Yeah.
And again, the entirety of the movie, as far as I can tell, except for maybe the first act, uh, is a dream sequence, and even the first act is in doubt because of the open, where you've got this like really trippy imagery and Penelope Cruz whispering in Spanish, "Open your eyes, open your eyes, open your eyes," until she finally says it in English, which I guess is a nice advertisement for the original.
Yeah. I gotta say, there's one interesting concept in here that I've never really thought about before from a sci-fi aspect,
Hmm.
and it is the idea of mortality as home entertainment. I find that super interesting in the context of freezing yourself and coming out of this perfect hibernation after sort of experiencing whatever you want to experience during that.
Huh.
Like take your real life where you're basically immortal. They can freeze you, they can wake you up, they can do whatever with your cells. uh you might want a vacation from that, right? And your vacation might be, well, I can't get out of my life in the real world, so let me go die effectively. Let me be suspended, cryogenically frozen, and give me all of these experiences. This, like, hey boss, I'm gonna take my time off and I'm gonna get over to LE and we're gonna do this LE experience.
Huh.
It's kind of a, it's not like super different from a lot of different other forms of this, but I had never really considered it in cryogenic stasis.
Hmm.
And honestly, I don't even know if it works, because if you're cryogenically frozen and yet your brain's active,
Yeah. How? Yeah, that's what I kept on wondering. Is like,
it doesn't make any
how
sense.
does that work if the substrate of consciousness is itself frozen to like absolute zero? How the hell is anything happening? Although I
You
guess,
can't. You have to just throw that out the window, because it
but
doesn't
it
work.
kind of works because like I think you could make an argument that would work, but it would work on a very much slower. And they do establish that he's asleep for like 180 years, and he experiences roughly what 6 to 3 months of real life during those periods. So maybe it's like you're
Yeah.
processing life, but it's like the opposite of a Westworld simulation. It happens at like 1/100th of human speed instead of like a normal time.
Right.
The other thing is, I guess it would be cool is like, what if your brain does work? Like, well, some things that take a long, long time, like going through med school. Like, if you're a well-off doctor, you put yourself in suspended animation so your body doesn't age, and you go to med school and you learn everything in like only like like it takes you 8 years to learn that stuff, but your body's not aging.
Yeah. It's an
So
I know kung fu moment.
yeah, anytime you want to do any kind of training or anything like that, you save your body so you can save your body, and you only get your body out of storage for like real experiential things.
But if it does work at like 100th
Oh
of the
yeah, you're
speed,
right. It would take you like
you would be
300
so
years
far
to
behind.
you take 1,000 years to get into med school, and by the time you
Yeah.
get out, they've cured cancer and there is no more doctors. Yeah,
Yeah.
good point. Good point. Uh, yeah, it's a wild movie. I really don't understand why people. I like I said, maybe when I see the original, it'll make sense. But I enjoyed watching it. I guess I'm glad I saw the American version first. If the Spanish version is going to make it look like a turd, you want to watch them in that order. Or maybe now that I've seen the American version, the Spanish version will seem like a turd. That's unfortunate. Do you want to talk about our movie for next week?
Sure.
We mentioned, where do we confess this at? We confessed that we didn't see the movie Train Spotting on a recent podcast, and we got drug, rightfully so. It's a great movie. It's well regarded as a really gritty depiction of drug culture and the things that can go wrong. I mean, I've seen Requiem for a Dream, so I kind of think I know what I'm in for. We're going to see the 1996 film Trainspotting.
Hmm.
Uh, I have never seen it. I don't even know what it is, except for it stars Ewan McGregor, and I think they surf trains.
I mean, I know it's about drugs,
It's about
but that's
drugs,
the extent of it.
and they're spotting trains at some point. So we'll see what happens. That's we're going to be back for next week's Bald movie. Hope you enjoyed our discussion of Vanilla Sky, and we'll see you back next week for Train Spotting. Until then, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Jim.
See ya.